Welcome back to the JMA Podcast, everyone. I am your host, John Murray. Today we have John Borter. He is an instructor for the Doyle system of Irish cane fighting. I actually had the pleasure of training with him a little bit a while ago. Without further ado, let's jump right into it, guys. Let's welcome John to the stage. John, my friend, how have you been?
Good, my friend. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am blessed as always, and it's a pleasure to have you. John, you've been training in Irish cane fighting for a while. Why don't we just jump into it? And how'd you start? How'd you get started in this?
I would rephrase that to more Irish stick fighting.
Okay.
Yeah, Irish sticks can be used as a cane, absolutely, but we don't want to confuse it with some of the other cane systems that are out there that use the crook cane and that kind of stuff. You know, our chosen weapon of use is the Shillelagh. We'll get into that a little bit as we go, but it kind of happened on I kind of tripped over it. You know, I have martial arts backgrounds and stuff like that, so I'm always tooling through the martial arts sites and that kind of stuff. And so I saw someone who was selling a Shillelagh. Now, I didn't know anything about Irish stick fighting. Most people don't. So I'm like, that's really cool. I've always kind of been, attracted to canes and sticks and Shillelaghs and that kind of stuff, not having any idea what it is. So I bought one. I bought him off a stick maker out of Ireland. His name is Declan Casey, who is just a phenomenal craftsman. Just incredible. It came. I was excited. I posted it on social media, and then a friend of mine, James Stewart out of the UK, he and I were partnering up on our women's self-defense program, and he was teaching it over there. And he's from out that area, so he knows that area well. And I said, look, I got a Shillelagh. And he said, now you have to learn how to use it. I'm like, what do you mean have to learn how to use it? I don't understand the question or the statement. He goes, oh yeah, that's a fighting stick. I'm like, what? What are you kidding? No clue. And he goes, reach out to Bernie Letty. Bernie Letty is my instructor. And he said, he'll get you set up. So I reached out to Bernie. Bernie had recently started doing Zoom sessions. Something that COVID kind of reinvented the whole training environment, and he took me on as a student as well as my fiance Trish, and the rest is history. It's just something I tripped over and met Bernie. Bernie's an amazing guy. I think Bernie's awesome, and next thing you know, I'm doing some Irish stick fighting. Went through the whole program, got to instructor, and there are other instructors in the U.S. as well. I'm not the only one, or Trish is not the only one. But we're proud to represent Bernie and Doyle Irish Stick. So,
Did you have to travel for the training, or was that something that you were able to do kind of virtually?
Well, you can do student level training virtually. Get up to there's basically, just so people get familiar with the system. There's 5 levels in Doyle Irish Stick Fighting. Everyone starts off as a new student, and then there's levels 1, 2, and 3 are student levels. Level 4 is coach. That's when you can work with your instructor to start developing your teaching style and fine-tune your technique. Coach is a mandatory 1-year, period. And then after that, when you feel like you've got it all together, you can train for instructor. We can do 1, 2, and 3, and even coach via Zoom, kind of a thing. Instructor training or instructor certification has to come from Bernie directly, and it has to be done in person. So what happens was he comes over to the States a couple times a year. We were lucky enough to kind of set that up. We actually were Trish and I were both supposed to test the previous year, going back a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, I had some employment issues. My company laid off a bunch of people, and unfortunately, I was one of them. So I'm like, look, I'm not going to spend the money to fly to Ireland. Right now, we don't know what's going to happen. So we waited till the following year for Bernie to come over here. And we tested alongside some really, really great people. And we became instructors. He came to New York City. We went down there for a week or so and went through the training, and voila, here we are. So
is there a reason that that you have to go through only one individual, or is there a reason that there's only one individual you can go through for the training, or for that instructor level?
Yeah, there is actually. It's still held pretty tight to the vest, right? And kind of an offshoot of that is you won't find any instructional videos out there. You won't find any instructional manuals. Not for Doyle. There may be some other systems, but Doyle was always held very, very, very close. And there's a bit of a history around that. We can get to that when we do that. And it was never taught outside the family, right? It was the Doyle family. It went from Doyle father to Doyle son, Doyle father to Doyle son, all the way down. And so who I consider the patriarch of the system, Glenn Doyle, who is currently living in Canada, he ended up, inheriting the system from his father. It was never taught outside the family, but Glenn was like, Dad, you got to let me teach this stuff. You got to, Greg Doyle is a legend in Irish stick fighting. That's Glenn's father. And he unfortunately became very ill. He came down with cancer and it was terminal. So one of their final conversations was, I'm paraphrasing now, Dad, you have to let me teach this stuff because I'm your only son. And if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, this is all gone. And Glenn had asked for a number of years, is my understanding, to let me teach this publicly. And almost literally on his deathbed, one of the last conversations, from what I understand, Greg Doyle finally said, sure, go ahead, teach it outside the family. But you know what? Be careful and be ready, because people are they're bastardize it. They're going to try to take ownership. They're going to change it. And Glenn, took on that challenge. And back in the late 90s up to the mid, 20 teens, he was out there teaching like a trooper, just all over the world and getting it out there. And then back in, I think it was 2022, he decided to kind of semi-retire, right? And he named Bernie as the head of the system. So Bernie is now the chieftain. Bernie is the first and only non-Doyle person to be head of the Doyle system. So we were lucky at that point because he was already our instructor. So we were like, our instructor is the head of the system. This is going to be great. But we do, the reason there's no manuals, there's no videos, is because we do that, quite honestly, to protect the integrity of the system and to protect the integrity of the teaching. And so the only person really qualified to rate someone or rank someone to the level of instructor is Bernie Letty, the chieftain of the system. So that's a conscious decision
How do they pick the I guess the instructors who? Well, I guess my hold on. Sorry, I'm trying to fix my audio while I'm asking a question here. But I'm curious how they pick exactly the next instructor down the line. So like for example, the gentleman who is in charge right now, Bernie. Say Bernie kind of decides to retire. Does he is this under his pick? Is there a board? What's kind of the process for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So far, we've never had to face that. I can give you my speculation. Glenn Doyle is still involved on the peripheral in the background, so I think he would have the final decision if anything ever happened to Bernie or Bernie decided to retire. There really isn't, just to be clear, a hierarchy in Doyle, right? There's Glenn,
yep,
and who's kind of semi-retired. Bernie kind of runs the show. There's Bernie, and then there's the rest of us. So there's no real kind of hierarchy. So I think they would have to look at who the person that's going to be, I'm not going to say most qualified, but the best to get the message out. Because one of the biggest initiatives right now is to spread the system, and at the same time keep it close to the vest and not mass market this kind of stuff. We don't want to be a McDojo kind of thing. You hear that terminology a lot. It's very, very quality conscious. So at this point, if anything ever happened to Bernie, he's had to step aside. I think he and Glenn would have some conversations about who the current instructor pool is and try to pick out who the next best person would be. Fortunately, I don't think we're going to have to deal with that anytime soon. But it's not. Yeah, there's no hierarchy where if so-and-so retires, this person moves up. It's going to be a matter of discussion and evaluation and making a choice. That's my speculation. So we've never had to face that. So.
How far back does the Doyle system actually go, as far as you're aware?
Well, as far as I'm aware, the Doyle system goes back, to my understanding, 250 years. It's been there about sometime in the early 1800s. There were some pretty significant changes with the Doyle system. So that's when you start seeing more of a modern application of it as we see it today. To get into the history of it, the system, or Irish stick fighting, I should say, is called Bataireacht. Right? So that's the Irish word for basically stick fighting, right? And that goes back hundreds of years. And some people, if they really want to dig in, you can say thousands of years, because a lot of these can be kind of traced back to the ancient fighting arts of the Celts.
Right.
And it really kind of, in the late 1600s into the 1700s, that's when it really kind of took off. So I can tell you that my understanding is in the early 1800s, at the very least, there were Doyle people involved in the art and the system. Some of them kind of emigrated to Newfoundland, and it's still kind of carried on there. But you're talking at least 200, going into a little bit more than 200 years, is my understanding that the Doyle family have been kind of at the forefront and really involved in Irish stick fighting, as far as we can tell, because a lot of it again was remained hidden. It's not something that really has been shared publicly. Irish stick fighting in general, because there's a lot of reasons for that. It was really a hidden art. It really boomed in, say, the 1700s. What happened was the British were occupying Ireland, and they outlawed weapons. Can't have any weapons. They made a lot of laws, let's put it that way. Catholics primarily couldn't have weapons. They couldn't run for office. They forbid certain schooling of their children. So the British were really trying to almost obliterate the Irish culture. So they went underground. They started using sticks, and that's really what happened. And then it really kind of took off in the 1800s kind of situation, which is really so much interesting as far as the history is concerned. The challenge with that, I know I'm veering off a little bit, that many people that we interact with, which we'll get into that. We have a lot of connections in the Irish culture now. They never knew it existed. I had an 86-year-old man walk up. We had a little table set up at an Irish musical venue, just an informational table, a little video running, that kind of stuff. And he walks up, he's got a cane, he hobbles up and he says, I'm 86 years old. I was born and raised in County Cork. I've never heard of this. And I'm like, no, I'm not surprised. And that kind of surprised him, that I had that kind of response. So we took him aside and we kind of explained. Most people have never heard of this. I have people from Ireland that say, this doesn't exist. This is a bunch of bull. And when you do the research, oh, no, it certainly exists. There's documentation that goes back hundreds of years, that explain how this exists and explains how, police reports on faction fighting and that kind of stuff. It's all out there. But because it was so hidden, and quite frankly, it was so just beat down, the British occupation, they would do things like they would hand draw, because it was back then before there was a lot of photography, pictures of Irish people, Irishmen, with monkey faces, with a drink in one hand and a stick in the other. And it really was a huge negative propaganda campaign.
Yep.
The Roman Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church, was not a big fan of this kind of violence that was going on. The famine came along, and that's when you really saw Irish stick fighting kind of change, because people had other things to be aware of and to be concerned about, and just trying to emigrate and try to being adopted into other cultures. Really kind of put it towards the end.
For I guess for the viewers, some you mentioned some people are claiming that it didn't exist in Ireland.
Yeah.
What are the best sources that you could find that you found had, I guess, proper documentation of the development or the history of it?
Sure.
You mentioned something in police reports. I mean, in America, it's a lot easier to get, police reports, even if they're a little dated, through FOIA requests.
Yep.
I'd imagine in England it might be a little bit harder or different.
It's very hard to get written documentation, especially in Ireland, because through the occupation, a lot of those records were destroyed or just kind of disappeared. I will tell you, and I have to apologize, recently I came across a particular venue where you can actually click on it and bring up historical documentation. And
Yep.
It does talk about Irish stick fighting. It does talk about Bataireacht. It talks about, the impact between the British and the Irish. I don't recall off the top of my head what that's called, because it's something I just recently came upon, but it's got some amazing handwritten letters and accounts for faction fighting, that kind of stuff. I will tell you this, if you want to, really connect with probably who I consider the top authority, the top authority as far as writing Irish stick related material, his name's John W. Hurley. And he is on Facebook, and he does have a lot of books out there on Amazon and stuff. He must have 7 or 8 books out, and they're just incredibly well researched. It really is. And John Hurley is just an amazing author. And his primary thing was, I really want to dig into the history and dig into Irish stick fighting. So it is pretty incredible.
Real quick, I want to pull something up for the viewers, because I did a little quick Google search here. Let's go to right here. That works. Boom, and let's pop it up on the page. There is actually from the the National Museum of Ireland. Actually talks about the faction fighting here. I didn't obviously didn't go into it, but there is some stuff on the factional fighting available through the Irish website. I
Yep.
don't
Yep.
see the
Absolutely.
shillelagh popping up, but I'm sure there's a little something in there. All right, cool.
Sure.
Sorry, I was curious, so I just did a quick little Google search here.
No, you're cool. Yeah, there's a lot. There's actually quite a lot out on Google. That's why I would think sometimes when these people, I have one gentleman that comes to mind. He was up in arms when I posted something about it. This is all fake. This is all garbage. Blah 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 blah. I'm like, dude, do a Google search. And he's like, well, anybody could do that. I go, okay, read a book. you know, well, it doesn't mean it's right. So there's a lot of resistance to that if it's not something that they were raised with and it wasn't part of their culture. I would say, honestly, I for Bernie, because he's based in Leitrim, Ireland, he's got a job and a half on his hands to try to spread it. One of the biggest challenges has been spreading it within the country of origin. Irish people either don't know about it, refuse to see it, or some of them are pretty excited about it. I'm not saying about all Irish people, but it's very, very challenging to get that out there because it was squashed, it was hidden, it was kind of beaten down over the generations.
It almost missed its opportunity in time. It seems like you have like a window of opportunity with certain martial arts to really make an impact on the culture, like
Yep.
Filipino martial arts, for example, are good contrast for this, where like they've really made a name for themselves, not in modern day, but in their ancient combat and going back to when they were actually stick fighting or when they were actually using these knives for combat.
Sure.
Whereas it sounds like with Irish cane fighting, the struggle is in the fact that when it would have been more proper to be used or more socially acceptable, it kind of fell unnoticed. How many? I guess I do have another question. How many other systems are there in existence? Like I imagine so if the Doyles came up with their system, was there a Murray system? Was there maybe a Gordon's? I guess I'm now listing
Yeah.
Scottish clans, not Irish clans, but um, you get the gist of what I'm saying here.
I do. Back in the day when it was, let's talk about the factions for a second, how they could group that. Most of their factions, most of the people that practice a particular style would be family-based. It may be town-based, county-based, occupation-based. And it was really a matter of bonding together to protect themselves against other Irish groups because, it was a pretty violent time, or the British. So it's almost impossible to tell how many were back there because you hear about different things. You hear about different family names that come out. There's the Coolins, there's the Lawlers, there's the Blacks, there's the Mulvihills. And, these are people that all used to get into faction fights, against each other. But it's almost hard to tell exactly how far back it goes, and about how many are out there. I'll tell you this. Generally, it's believed that the last recorded faction fight was in 1887. But then again, people have shown me advice that or proof that there was one in 1920, kind of thing. So it's kind of hard to really tell. There's some systems out there currently that maybe we can't really pin down their historical tracking and that kind of stuff. People have said to me, I'll only believe the Doyle system if you give me documented proof of their genetic family. I don't have that. No one has that, kind of thing. So
right.
So there's a couple out there. As far as the family system and the historical end of it, Doyle is the only one I found that I at the time could really pin down and say this appears very, very accurate. It really, really does. The first faction fight was supposed to be in 1805. The last faction fight was supposed to be 1887. But these are reported faction fights now. These are reported, which means they were reported by newspapers or law enforcement, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Keep in mind that was generally driven by the British government. So what happened was, as faction fights continued, and they said they were eventually put to the point of saying, okay, we need to stop this, right? Usually they would leave people alone. As long as they weren't bothering, the British, or they weren't bothering, what they considered their favorite, part of town, their favorite people. They would just sit back and observe. If they want to beat each other up, that's great. At least you're not giving us a hard time kind of approach, right? But at
Makes
one
sense.
point, I think it was 1834. That's what it is, June 24th, in a place called Ballybunion. There was a faction fight, and I've heard different numbers and different reports, but the one that seems to be most consistent, where over 2,000 people got into a faction fight. And by the time it was over, about 200 people were dead. Now, the reported number is 35 people died, but they didn't necessarily count the people because they're an island, so they would take a boat to this beach in Ballybunion. They didn't count how many people died afterwards, or how many people drowned trying to swim back out to the boat. You see what I mean? So the report I've heard is about 2,000 people were involved, and about 200 people ended up dying in that. I think that's when the British said, okay, look, we got to start paying attention to this, because it's not fun anymore. Just letting them beat themselves up. If they ever organize and get together, we're going to have some serious problems on our hands, right?
Right.
And so that's really what when they tried to really kind of clamp down on faction fighting, they started. My understanding is, from reading numerous articles, I'm not a historian. I study this from the context of I love Irish stick fighting, is that they would underreport it, because the British government, the British police forces wanted to, impress their bosses and say, oh, we got this thing clamped down. So a lot of the fights were not reported. What they also didn't report, there's really kind of two versions of this stick fighting thing. One is like an entertainment thing, where they just fought just to get out that frustration, right? They're an occupied country. They're frustrated. They're clamped down. They can't run for office. They can't even buy a horse, higher than a certain rank, kind of thing. I mean, it was really trying to stomp out, like I mentioned, Irish culture. So think of it this way. Look at today. Today can be a very frustrating thing. You turn on the WWE or whatever it's called these days, and you see thousands of people in this auditorium, watching these fights and screaming and yelling, rah, rah, rah. They're getting their frustrations out. That's
everyone
what
loves
happens.
a good gladiator fight.
Exactly. Yeah. Look back at the Romans, right? The same thing. And they don't recognize it as a level of suppression back in the Roman day. They did that to kind of keep control.
Right.
So once this happened, the British were like, yeah, no, we need to get this under control. So that's when they started to clamp it out, and try to not allow this thing to spread. But they didn't report the recreational fights, where two guys just kind of got into it, and they went out there and beat each other up, and then helped up. One guy would win, they'd help up, they go to the bar and have a pint. That's the That's the kind of the entertainment part of it. But at the same time, you got faction fights like we were just talking about, where hundreds of people have died. So it also became very, very deadly. There was a couple of different levels. And my understanding is the more the frustration grew, the more it became darker, that way. So,
Right.
it was some pretty severe, pretty serious things going on. So
How did so it went from like almost like a it sounds like, I should say, like it went from a gang activity kind of deal to like almost like an organized martial art. How is that do you know anything about that transition, how that kind of went about? Like what were the early methods of training that were used? How does something that just goes from two guys beating each other with a stick to an organized system of beating each other with sticks?
Yeah, I can say it probably happened simultaneously. So let's put it this way. They can be qualified as gang fights. And that's probably the best example I can give you, right? If anybody's ever seen Gangs of New York, right? That's the closest movie I've seen. And it looks like a factional, an actual faction fight. It was brutal. It was nasty. I think families develop their own systems, right? It's not this, there's no one global Irish stick fighting thing like you think about karate, right? Despite the systems, despite the variations, you can kind of look at it and say, yeah, that's karate. You know what I mean? Or kung fu or something like that. It doesn't work that way with Irish stick. If there are any systems out there, there's some very, very different approaches to it. So I'm not sure how organized it came on a wide scale, but it definitely became organized within those particular family cells or those kind of community groups, right? And most of them were hedge schools, which means you do it in the backyard, you do it out in the field, right? That kind of thing. And I'll give you an example. The system, the Doyle system, uses the terminology Rinca an Bata Uisce Bheatha. which means dance of the stick of the water of life, right? And their pattern, their form is called the rinka, right? So one of the stories I had heard, or one of the examples I had heard was, they'd see a bunch of guys out there in the field swinging sticks, and the British regiment would come along and they would walk over and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they would say, "Rinka," right? Which means dance in Ireland, in Irish. So the British would take out their Irish to British thesaurus and they'd go, "Rinka, dance. Okay, you guys are okay." Kind of a thing. So when you look at some of the other cultures, like you look at capoeira, you look at some of the FMA stuff, they would hide their martial arts and dance in more entertainment moves. So it was never really out there. It really wasn't. And I would say most of them have just disappeared. I'm sure there's probably some that are still being carried on. There might be a handful of systems out there, but Doyle's the only one I found that I could, at least based on documentation, track back, to the 1800s and say, okay, this seems very legit. But again, very, very different than other systems, other styles. They're all different from each other. I'm not trying to tout Doyle, even though that's what I practice, but they're all different than the other ones. So the biggest difference with the Doyle system that came about probably sometime in the early 1800s is all stick fighting pretty much started out as a one-handed system. You just swing in a stick. And maybe they developed their techniques based on what happened in a faction fight. My understanding is that what the Doyles did, if it didn't work, they didn't do it the next time, right? Kind of thing. And so you kind of pigeonhole and come down to a system that actually is functional. Sometime in the early 1800s, I'm guessing sometimes around 1820-ish, right?
Does the system still, I guess, focus on any pressure testing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So what happened was one of the Doyle ancestors was a boxer, a pugilist. And he realized, at one point, geez, if I hold this stick with two hands, I can get a lot more out of this than one hand. Think of it this way. You're in a faction fight. You got 30 people on your side, 30 people on that side, and you go, rah, and you throw that stick back and you go, "Oh, sorry, Cousin O'Malley. I didn't mean to hit you in the head." You know what I mean? There's a certain lack of control with the big sweeping motions. So this gentleman, who was a pugilist, adopted boxing to Irish stick, and it became a little more compact, very, very aggressive. One of the motto that we have is ever forward. I mean, we're not sitting out here sword fighting with sticks. We're going in there and trying to take care of business. And it was a huge change in the delivery and the culture of the Doyle's Irish stick fighting. And that's what it's known for today, is the two-handed approach to the fighting. So
okay. So getting into like the more modern era,
sure.
like what goes into the training currently? Obviously, we can't go out and we can't start a massive brawl in the street. We can't we can't I guess go out and pressure test it in the street. What elements of your training keep it functionable for the modern era?
Well, we start off like any other martial art, because that's what it is. Sometimes I jokingly say on some of my promotional posters, learn the world's oldest new martial art, because it's been around for hundreds of years, but most people don't even know it exists, right? So you start with your foundations, right? Your blocks, your strikes, your footwork, that kind of stuff, like any other martial art. But there's quite a few blocks, and there's quite a few variations on this, depending on how you do it. And as you work up through, the techniques become more close quarter, become much more aggressive. And as you get into, say, coach or instructor level, you start actually sparring with each other. You put the equipment on, you spar, you make sure this works, and you have some fun with it. So, but yeah, we're not going out and starting a faction fight anytime soon.
Do you guys do you throw on like the full body gear, kind of like I guess I think I've seen the people where the FMA guys wear something, a bunch of pads and stuff.
Let's say you can, because there are schools that do that. That's what we do in my particular faction. But I know of schools that don't pad up. They just go for it. You know what I mean? And they try to do it safely, but there's enough aggression that, if you hit this guy full power, he'd be down. Right? Yeah. One of the challenges we have with sparring, and this is reportedly what I heard of that Glenn Doyle had said, was I think sparring has a value. Don't get me wrong. You learn distance, you learn aggression, you learn how to find those entries. But the problem with sparring, the challenge with sparring, is this was not a sparring art. This was a fighting art. So what happens is you gear up, and you hit someone, full bore in the head, and they have a protective helmet on. They keep coming. You know what I mean? And in the reality of it is, you hit someone in the head in a faction fight, they go down, right?
Right.
It's not there. So there's always that disconnect, and I think there's a disconnect in any martial art that does that. But especially if you hit somebody with a heavy-weighted stick on the end, it kind of gives the striker the misinterpretation that maybe strike wasn't as effective as it could be. It gives the person who's coming in, I can just fluff that off. I'm not worried about it. So there is a challenge to that. I think you have to keep sparring into context. You want to build that aggression, but you also want to be safe. But understanding that some of these techniques you do, if you do it when you're not all geared up, are going to be nasty. One of the instructors, I think it might have even been Bernie, who said that his grandmother told him a story one time when he was a kid, before he even got involved in Irish stick fighting, about an Irish stick fight where a guy was killed in the street. Guy somehow caught him in the back of the head with a stick, and he died.
You guys got a little knob on that thing. That little knob alone just adds that little bit of. It's almost like a mace. So
it is
little mace at the end of your stick there, on the shillelagh.
And that is a great analogy. Like here, I got one here I can show you, like this here. So right, it's got the knob on the end. This is typically a root ball of blackthorn. Blackthorn is not a tree, contrary to purple leaf. It's more of a shrub or a bush, but it grows really tall, right? And this would be cut out, and this would be the root of it. This is so compact and so hard that, you feel it. You absolutely feel it. This particular one's an antique. You can see it's got thorns in it. That's how it used to be. So they would use those thorns to scrape down someone's face or poke them in the throat or even push them in the arm to control it. These were brutal, weapons at the time. But they used them as walking sticks. These are walking sticks, officer. These aren't weapons, kind of a thing. But
right.
These are very significant as far as the ability to cause pain or to defend your friend, or your family. So it's pretty incredible stuff. But yeah, there should be some pressure testing involved. With my particular faction, I wait till people get to a certain point to do that. But yeah, there absolutely has to be.
One of the big things, coming from a Brazilian jiu-jitsu background, boxing background, I'm all about pressure testing. Anything I train, I feel like it has to have some level of pressure testing.
Yep.
To the contrary, I guess I don't want to push back too much on you. But I feel like even with headgear, like someone might move forward to you, but like the thing, I guess, with sparring is never meant to hurt your opponent, right?
Yes.
So having the headgear is almost a must. Even in boxing and MMA, we have professional fighters on our team, but I've always seen them. Most people put the headgear on. Some of the guys who are more adept at head movement might be like, I don't need that fucking shit. But but I personally, the way I see it is like, yeah, they're gonna move forward because the impact is a little bit less between the 16-ounce gloves and the 16-ounce in the headgear. But what you're not looking to hurt someone. What you're actually looking to do, from my understanding in sparring, is you're looking to find those openings, like you mentioned. Because when someone's moving at you, it's not gonna be the same. Even in sparring, if my intent is to hit you, right? I might be I'm not going to just, throw my jab as loosely as I do on the bag. I'm not going to throw my cross as loosely or my hook.
Yep.
And I'm not going to move. I'm going to move in a certain manner. And from my understanding of sparring, it's always been one of those things where, like, you want to have a certain understanding of how people move in the way they,
Absolutely.
And I guess, to a little bit of a criticism of the art, if you incorporate more of this element, you almost add a more practical level to what you're training, because like the students are able to see, okay, well, this guy's gonna move this way, so now we can just crack him in the leg here when he moves forward for that jab, or you see the patterns of movement, and it adds an extra level of practicality to the art.
I agree. And no pushback and no disagreement there. Like I said, we do pressure test, so we do that. I think the statement originally came from the fact that this stuff was never meant to be sparring. If I hit that guy in the head, he's going to die.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it just was a variation or a difference from what the original intent was. But look, this isn't the 1800s anymore. You need to be able to bring that to a certain level safely. So
Right.
God forbid you ever have to use it. But no, I have to agree with you on all points. That was not any pushback or any disagreement at all. So
It was one of the things I think, I don't know how much you know about Jigoro Kano. I'm probably butchering the name, and I apologize to every Japanese viewer who sees this. But Jigoro, or Kano, I'm just gonna say Kano. What he did was when he took the traditional jujitsu and he broke it down into, I think it was a 40 to 70, it was 40 to 70 techniques from judo. He did this in a way that he wanted to take the most effective techniques, but he wanted to take the ones that were effective, but also bring it into a practical way into the future, like into the modern era. I think it was the Edo period. I might be no, the Meiji era restoration. That's what it was, the Meiji.
yep.
And I guess to the point, like a lot of people who still practice traditional jujitsu, a lot of the big criticism is a lot of them say we can't spar because it's gonna hurt someone. It's gonna hurt someone. I think it's the most ridiculous argument. I hate it almost because to me, like, there's almost always a safe way to practice this, and you have to understand, like, if you're telling someone to go into fight, right? Like the army does this, like they find a way to simulate the real combat
Absolutely.
with the understanding that, like, if I crack you in the fucking head with, like, with this stick in your situation, you know, okay, it's over. You got cracked in the head. You didn't block it. Maybe there's got to be a way to almost translate it into the future. And I feel like a lot of arts could take from this. Even the Filipino martial arts, you hear it from them all the time too. It's like, oh, we can't pressure test because of this and this. It's one of those things that just
No, I
I
absolutely hear
I
you.
don't mean to get on a ramble here. It's just one of those things that I can't let go of for some reason.
No, you have to pressure test it. I'll give you an example of a little bit of pressure testing. It was completely unofficial. I had one of my students, I have a study group down in Norfolk, Virginia. And one of his students said, "Yeah, let's try this out. Let me see what's going on." He says, "Okay." So they geared up. The guy had the gloves on. He had a knife, a training knife in his hand. So my student was all set to go. And the guy came in with a knife and he just went whack and just nailed him right in the hand, right? And that knife went flying. And now he had the protective gloves on. And he went, "Oh my God," and all of a sudden he had a new respect for that strike, right? Rather than just training. He goes, "Let's go again." I said, "All right." So this time he hit him twice. He hit the knife and then the head gear. He went pow, pow. And the guy was like rocking. He's like, "Wow," and he's got the headgear on. And then the last thing that happened was, because he sent me these 3 videos, was that he decided to give the guy a little chance, get a little bit closer. And some of my students started to back up. We don't back up. The only time I'm going to back up is if I'm giving up a little space so I can take it back again. He started to retreat. And what happened was he got overrun. And the first 2 videos were great, fantastic examples of what you can do with a stick. Then he started to back up. And he said, "What happened?" I said, "You broke the rule. Ever forward, you don't back up because they can always go faster forward than you can backward." And that's where you ended up on your back getting stabbed by a rubber knife. You know what I mean? But it was great to see. It was great to see him take the initiative to, get out there and wrap that stick. And there have been Irish stick fighters that have fought in full contact tournaments. There's a gentleman I remember who fought in one of the Dog Brother tournaments up in Canada. You know what I mean? He's out there with an Irish stick. And if you know the Dog Brothers, they don't mess around. These guys are legit. And he did, from my understanding, he did a commendable job. So, oh yeah, you have to pressure test it. You have to pressure test it. That's really going to be a huge part of, does this work or does this not work?
Maybe if we're lucky, we'll get to see Doyle system versus Cali or fencing or something.
Maybe. I think that's what was going on at the Dog Brothers. I think we're going back a number of years ago, but I don't think it was Doyle versus Irish stick versus Irish stick. I think it was a mixed. I will tell you that I've had some kind of side conversations with Bernie, and he really wants to start doing the kind of the competitions again. He thinks that's going to bring us to another level. They kind of were back burner for a while. Now he's in charge, and the conversation we had was, I'm really looking at re-engaging and relaunching these world competitions. They were big in Canada going back into, say, the late 90s, early 2000s, as I understand it. And they just don't seem to happen anymore. So there's not a venue to do that unless you're doing it within your own school or your own organization. But
A lot of the jiu-jitsu guys, from my understanding, is I work with a couple different groups, and a lot of them are just these students who want to start their own promotions or events, and they figure out the current rule system. I mean, unfortunately for you guys, you don't have a rule set yet. You'd have to kind of build up that thing. But
sure.
a lot of them just start these events. They sell a few tickets. They say, "Here, come on through. Buy a ticket or two, support the community." And you get a decent number of spectators. And in jiu-jitsu, I mean, particularly, I know our point system is based on striking ability.
Okay.
Most people don't know this. I actually read a whole book from Henzo and John Donaher, big names in the community. But John does a great job philosophically breaking down jiu-jitsu. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things he explained was in our art, you'll see a lot of the points are based entirely off of your ability to hit your opponent. So mount is obviously like 6 points, because if I'm on top of you, I have the best ability to punch you in the face repeatedly, and there's not a
Yep.
lot you can do unless you know how to bridge and roll. But then, side control might be closer to 3 or 2, because the person has the ability to shrimp out or block, and
Sure.
different things like
Sure.
that. You guys could really do something very similar to that. I mean, with head strike, 6 points, and that would kind of replicate the idea or the practice of, okay, headshot, you're done. you know
Right.
a lot of times in MMA, you see the mount or the back. Someone gets your back, someone gets mount. You're either stuck or it's a fight.
Yeah.
It's a real fight for the person underneath or in the front. um where do you see a tournament coming in this future for you guys? Or
Yeah, there's discussions going on now. That's my understanding. It was a passing comment that I'd really like to see, competitions kind of thing. And if Bernie commits to something that he wants to see, he's probably going to get it done. I mean, he knows what he's doing. So yeah, I see probably not tomorrow, but I would bet you within the next couple of years, you might see more Irish stick fighting, coming to a competition,
that'd be
doing that
really
kind of thing.
cool.
So,
I
and then,
I tell you, you got one viewer right here. I'd show up. It sounds fun.
It's just great. I've been in the martial arts for a long time. I started doing Irish stick fighting a few years back, and I fell in love with it. It's the first time I fell in love with an art and a system in a very long time, and I just think it's great. I think it's great. I mean, from a defensive standpoint, let's take the competition out of it for a second. It's very conceptual, right? I can
Yeah.
use a shillelagh. I can use a walking cane. I can use an umbrella. I can use a hiking stick. It's all there. And yeah, so I think you'll start seeing a lot more things going on. We're doing some great job spreading the system, a system that was basically very limited going back, say, 20 years ago. It was very, very limited. Glenn had started developing a nice instructor network, and then at one point he decided he was going to semi-retire a number of years later. And then Bernie's traveling the world, opened it up. I personally have 150 students right now. About half of them are in study groups and half of them are on Zoom sessions. So I try to do my best to help promote the art. There's a couple of great instructors, a number of great instructors out there in the US and the UK and Ireland. We're just all kind of, getting together and let's spread the art that we love. A lot of it is being spread because, these people are Irish or of Irish descent. So this is a tangible way to get their hands around something that's part of their history. I'll tell you right now, I have maybe this much Irish in me. I tell people that if I cut myself shaving, all my Irish goes down the drain. There's not a lot. So I don't have that cultural connection. But I love what I do. So I've made a lot of contacts within that culture. with a number of music groups and venues and other fighting systems and authors and all kinds of stuff. I love what I'm doing. I absolutely love what I'm doing. So, and not everyone, let's face it, not everyone's going to be a stick fighter. Not everyone's going to want a pressure test. Some people take martial arts for the exercise. Some people take martial arts for the social interaction. And we have a segment of those people as well, And that's okay. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. You need that kind of support system.
You get there's always going to be hobbyists, and there's always going to be the self-defense guys, and then there's always going to be the guys who want to actually fight with it.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm in the later camp. I love sparring. Sure. I love the engagement. I love the idea. Like even at you're at a random party, someone starts talking about jujitsu. Yeah, let me show you this fucking awesome takedown. Let me show you this choke. Yeah, it's awesome to find a martial art that you love so much. I feel like everyone should learn a martial art. And I will say, one of the beautiful things about the Irish cane fighting that I noticed is, you guys do have a lot of blocks that are seen in things like, I'm trying to think, what was it? I don't, is it tradition? It might be traditional jujitsu because I think they use the Joe staff, I believe.
Okay.
Which would be, I think, the closest contrast to the Shillelagh. Mainly in the length that it's not a long stick, it's a very short stick. It's two-handed, it's not one-handed. So you definitely see a lot of there's practicality in the art, and I would love to see it come out a little more in the future, which is especially why we had you here. Where do you see it in the next 10 years, hopefully?
Oh, I think it's going to grow by leaps and bounds. Bernie's mission is to get an Irish stick club in basically every town in Ireland and Europe and that kind of thing. My mission, as long as with many other people that are doing this, is try to get it out there in every YMCA. You know what I mean? Every after school program, whatever it happens to be. We just have to grow this because it is a beautiful, beautiful art. Some of the blocks that you saw when you trained with us, keep in mind, those are beginner level blocks. Right. So you're very stoic, they're very, block and counter, but that's not how it is in the real life. Right. I showed some of my students, how I would use this block and this other technique. And it was all one motion, all fluid. And they were just like, wow, that's how it's supposed to be. I'm like, yeah, but you got to learn how to do it first before you get up there. You gotta walk before you can run. So yeah, it's a very, very aggressive style. When you actually kind of lay that foundation, it's always moving forward. I truly think it's just going to continue to grow more and more and more. I really, really do. I'm not in a position to ever give it up. I'm not walking away, and I do this full time. I work, train 12 hours a week, or I'm sorry, 12 hours a day, I should say, every day of the week. And then I have study groups. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. I personally, myself and my fiance, Trish, who, by the way, is currently the only woman Doyle instructor in the world. And we teach study groups together. I teach 4 a week in the evenings, and I have one in Norfolk, Virginia. We're looking at adding another one in Norfolk, Virginia. I have one in Pennsylvania, a group that I support, and then another one in Rochester. So we're growing, man. We're growing, and we just want to see it get bigger and bigger and bigger. It deserves a lot of respect. It really does. It really does. So I anticipate you're going to see a lot of growth, especially if, you start seeing those kind of the competition he's talking about, but not just Irish stick fighting versus Irish stick fighting. That's a good way to start, I think. But why don't we get, just an all-encompassed stick fighting tournament going on? And it doesn't matter what style you use. And that would be awesome to see. So. Any
chance we could get you set up with a match with a Cali instructor?
Sure. We'll have some fun. Why not? All right,
maybe we'll have to set this up for a JMA video.
So I will tell you at one point. Now again, I was teaching very basic stuff, but there was a gentleman in New Hampshire who was a well-respected Cali instructor, and I won't mention his name, so I wanted to. But he wanted to take the seminar, and a lot of his students were there. And he said, "John, why do you hold the stick in the middle like this? Why, I said, gee, I don't know. Why don't we see what happens? and he had a stick in his hand. I said, why don't you throw an angle 1, right? So as soon as that reared back, I just went, and I put that thing right on his nose. I go, any questions? He's like, nope. So, that's not disrespect for Kylie at all, right? It wasn't that environment. We weren't trying to compete. I was trying to demonstrate how we hold the stick. I happen to be a huge FMA fan. FMA was probably, of all the things I've ever studied or been experienced to, that's got to be one of my top favorites. I love FMA, and I love the practitioners and pretty much every system. I think every system has something of value to offer. I just took it off, that wide open strike. And, some people go, I'll block that. It's totally cool, man. I know you can do that. That wasn't the situation. That wasn't the environment. But it just showed that, there's a mutual respect there. I love FMA. He went through the seminar and said, this Irish stick stuff is awesome, and we build that relationship even further. So,
do you have any seminars coming up for anyone to join if they're interested?
I'm trying to think. Now, we've got a couple kind of in the works. Actual live seminars, I think we're still trying to pin a couple down. We're going to probably have something in California when it comes to the spring. We just don't know the venue yet. We're working on that now. Really, if they're local, one of the better ideas would be just check out one of our study groups. They can find a lot of information on our website. I know you posted that information at some point.
Yep, it's right down below.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the works right now. I'm very lucky and very fortunate to teach some pretty substantial seminars. We had one in New Hampshire and had like 100 people there. Then again, you have one in another one and you have 10 people show up. It's just par for the course. But yeah, there's always a lot going on. Usually you'll see me post that stuff on our Facebook page. On the Facebook page, shameless plug, is called The Irish Stick. And it's interesting. I started building it years ago when I first got involved. So it's been there a couple of years. And it was for Irish stick fighting. But by extension, we invited Irish stick craftsmen, people that make shillelaghs. And now there's just a million shillelagh makers on there. You know what I mean? So it's kind of shifted its focus a little bit. But really, I opened it up to anybody Irish stick on that particular one. Some people said, do you want to have a Doyle page? I'm like, nah, there's already Doyle pages out there. I'm going to open this up because I truly think that interaction and working with other systems, other styles, that kind of stuff, just elevates all of us. It really does. I can't tell you, how many people, appreciate the fact that they can do a compare and contrast. And if somebody's training in that system over there, hey man, more power to you. It's a good system. Let's keep in touch, that kind of stuff. Some people come to me or come to one of our other instructors or come to Bernie. I think we have to look at the larger community. I think we want to make sure we don't fall into that faction fighting mentality that I'm going to hide all my techniques under funny names so no one knows what they are, because then they can beat me with that, that kind of thing. And that is a big thing of it. So, look,
it's funny you mentioned that. There's everyone in jiu-jitsu has a different name for the same technique, and it's a crossover into wrestling as well, which is one of those things that's like. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, in the community as a whole too. It's like you mentioned the the infighting. There's in martial arts. There's so many systems and styles. I'm not gonna say every system and every style is equal because I don't believe that.
Right.
Right. I don't think Aikido holds weight against Judo. I don't think Sistema holds any weight against anything. But there are certainly systems out there that have proven themselves, and there's also systems that are up and coming, just like Irish cane fighting. Like I said earlier, I do see the practicality in what you guys do. Like you said, like the snap with the stick where you the quick flick. I can see that hurting. I could see that being just devastating at the right angle and the right part of the body. Even just hitting the arm with that shit. Like if someone's got this shit up, you just fucking crack them right here. That's gonna fucking hurt. I don't care who you are. That's gonna fucking hurt.
It does. I mean, what I represent it, and I think it's generally represented in Doyle, is this isn't a club. It's a whip. I want it to be fast. We have certain structures in our positions to make sure it is. You know what I mean? And you were there. We did the double tapping thing where we're pop, 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 pop. I mean, you're hitting people fast with this.
Do you mind actually? You have the shillelagh in front of you. Do you mind actually just kind of demonstrating for the viewers?
No, not at all. Sure, if you can see me. So I'm going to use my trainer if you don't mind.
You're good.
I'm a trainer maker, right? Because a lot of people using shillelaghs for actual training can get very expensive, right? Blackthorn is kind of your standard now. You see a lot more blackthorn. You see hazel. There's whitethorn. There's ash. There's all kinds of sticks out there that they used to use. One more bit of history. There's a town in Ireland called Shillelagh, right? And apparently one of the rumors are that it came from the names came from there because it used to be surrounded by a giant oak forest. So oak was actually a really strong plant or really strong tree that they used to build shillelaghs. But then the British came in and basically leveled it, used the oak to build their own ships. So it was a big difference. It was a big difference. Let me see if I can open up this camera just a little bit more. If I can find a way to change the camera, I'm not really sure how to do it here. Here, we'll do settings.
I can also put you on the main screen. Oh, there you go. Look at that.
We're good. So, so to just give you a quick overview, a quick thing. Again,
I figured to show the viewers because, like I said, with that snap, it can be devastating. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a right side lead system, right? And we're here probably because the weapon, 90% of people are right-handed, so we're repping in the front. All those systems feel differently. And what you're doing is you're actually punching out, bouncing it off the forearm, and then bring it back again. So it's here, right? And this stick probably weighs 1.5 pounds, right? So it gives you some weight. So you're coming out, bam, and here, bam, 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 and you're bouncing it off and back again. That's part of the equation. So I'm going to come here and snap it, right? I might do a thrashing action which comes here. All the techniques are very, very close. There's not a lot of big open kind of moves. Even when I do kind of a thrash, it's controlled through the center of the body. A lot of footwork, a lot of forward footwork, a lot of aggressive motions. I might come in here and just smash the person in the face. I'm doing it that way. That's actually a technique called bust the anthill, going back to the funny names. Because if you bust the anthill, all the little red ants come running out. But yeah, these I've broken a number of sticks hitting it with this, using the techniques. I taught my student in Rochester a new technique. I use just this trainer where you come in and you just kind of drop it right down the center of the head. So we had him holding a stick up so people could practice and really understand the mechanics of generating power. He called me up the next day. He goes, "Can you send me some more sticks?" I go, "Sure. What do you need?" He goes, "We broke 4 sticks last night doing that technique." I'm like, "All right, I'll get you more sticks," kind of thing. But no, it's a very fast, quick, boom, kind of system. That bounce off the forearm is like a pinball machine. You're going, whap. Sometimes you might double tap it. I might hit it off of this hand. I might go, pow, pow. Hit somebody twice. But yeah, the snap is really important. There's not a lot of this. It's basically boxing with a stick.
That's kind of what it looks like. Because in boxing you have a lot of the jab work, which is a lot of you're establishing the distance, but you have that lead hand in front of you, and that's what you're working with. But a lot of it's the snap. The jab isn't a powerful punch; it's a quick punch, and it's that repetitive hit with that really rattles the opponent.
And in many cases, it's a distance finder, right? You're finding your range to do that. So pop, so you can throw that cross, behind it. So, but you see a lot of boxing oriented stuff when it comes to Doyle. They do a lot of kind of uppercuts, or shovel punches underneath the ribs, maybe into the kidneys or the liver. It's such a well put together system. It really, really is. I'm very impressed by the body mechanics and how everything kind of flows together. Flow is big. I don't want to, everything has to mix. One of the things that recently came out of a conversation that I heard from Bernie through Glenn Doyle is, and I'm sure he said this years past before I was even involved, is that the system's like a Lego set. So I give you a Lego set. I have a Lego set. We give one of your viewers a Lego set, and I say, build something, John. And okay, so you build a house. I have the same set, and I build a rocket ship. This guy builds a boat. You know what? It's all the same pieces, but we all have a different interpretation of it. We all have a different way to use it. I might find myself in a particular position that my follow-up is to strike here. Your follow-up might be to come across and hit him with the other side of the stick. That's what I like about the system. It has enough kind of open flow that it just works. And I sometimes I'll say this. Sometimes I think that Glenn Doyle would have been probably one of the best pool players in the world. And people look at me and kind of look kind of odd. I said, because let me explain something to you. A good pool player can put the balls into pockets. A great pool player sets up for the next strike, next shot. And every technique within Doyle gives you multiple next shots. So there's a flow to it. There's a connection to the system. And it's just, I learn something new every day. Every day I come up with something new. Oh, I never thought about that kind of thing. It's actually pretty cool. It's a very, very good system, especially if you're looking for something new.
What's your process for selecting techniques?
So, I mean, as far as a real life scenario, well, part of it is distancing, right? Because we're very, very close quarters. So and when it comes to punching, we have like 4 ranges of punches, and that's just my interpretation of it, kind of thing. We're always getting very, very close. So distancing, positioning. Sometimes I'll be stepping off to an angle, and I'll use that to clip through the ribs or clip through the face or break the hand, right? And then if I step through and clip, and I happen to be reset here, I can have I can thrash out. I can come back and hit with the end of the stick. There's a lot of different ways to do that. But basically, I look at distancing, position, and opportunity, right? And I'm always moving in. And again, once you hit somebody once and you follow up with 2 things or 3 things, you kind of control a lot of that environment. Especially if I'm coming in, I was talking today about a technique that breaks the shin bone. How do I get there? I step off to the side, do a particular technique, shin bone is broken. I kind of own that fight right now. You know what I mean? And I can do it pretty quickly. I had one of my students out of Virginia. I got one of those Thai boxing, pads that you hold on your arm.
Yes, the kicking pads, I believe.
The kicking pads, yeah, the smaller ones, like this big, right? Yeah, when you're doing your round
on the hand.
Yeah. And because we were doing a particular technique that has to do with breaking the shin, and you couldn't really practice it safely with somebody. You kind of got to stop, or you got to pull it. So you weren't getting the effect. So I said, "Here, wrap this around your shin." And I go, "Okay, now I'm going to do it." And that hit that he wasn't injured, but it hit with such force and such noise. He was like, "Ah!" I mean, it just freaked him out, because I said, "Now imagine if you didn't have that pad on, what would happen?" And that was a whole eye-opening experience, because it is a brutal technique. And that was one of my lesson plans for today when I was training was let's work on this technique. And people are like, "Wow." There is quite a few techniques. I'm not going to lie. It's not as simplified as some people think. You're not just swinging the stick. You've got a lot of techniques, got a number of blocks that work in different situations, number of strikes, number of entries. There's quite a bit to it, but it all fits together. And so, having a nice progressive curriculum is very helpful to do that. So.
All right, John. Well, we are on an hour and 30 minutes. Where can people find you, my friend?
Wow. So a couple places. One, the website is theirishstick.com. All right. Make sure you put the word "the" there, because there's another one that says irishstick.com. Theirishstick.com is our website.
Yep. I got it right down.
Yep. Our big thing is our Facebook page. When we started a number of years ago, we have about 25,000 people on the Facebook page now, which is a lot of people supporting making sticks, fighting with sticks, and crafting sticks. And if you want to go to the main Doyle site, it's www.doyleirishstick.com. You see a lot of redundancy between that site and my Irish Stick site, but you can contact me through any of that. So
I'm trying to find the link that you sent me so I can post it. Oh, here it is. I have the group page. I'm going to post it right in the stream so people can see it, and I'm going to post it down below where they can click on it. I think this is your group, but I'm sure they'll be able to find it through there. Well, let me save. All right. Well, I'll add it in a little bit later. There is a Facebook group, everyone. All right. Well, this has been the JMA Podcast. I am your host, John Murray. Thank you for watching, guys. Make sure to check out our sponsor, the Nonsensical Knowledge Podcast, where you can find everything conspiracy related and all the things they don't want you to know. My boy Edwin over there, he's great. He loves to research all that stuff. It's fun. It's fun. All right, guys. Till next time, stay blessed. Peace.